Hello, welcome back, folks. Keep it up. This is the last chapter. You almost did it. So as you know, in this series, we are covering PM Body of Knowledge 6th edition. Without any delay, let's continue to Chapter 13, Project Stakeholder Management.
Hey there, and welcome back to the deep dive. Have you ever tried to organize something, maybe a big group project for school or a family picnic, even just deciding what movie to watch with friends, and it feels like everyone has a totally different idea? Or worse, someone just isn't on board and suddenly your whole plan feels like it's, falling apart. It's enough to make you want to pull your hair out.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a common challenge, isn't it? Whether you're planning, say, a trip to a famous temple with your family, or maybe coordinating a neighborhood cleanup drive, even putting together a study group for exams, there are always different people involved.
Yeah.
Always. And yeah, each of them comes with their own thoughts, their own feelings, maybe even some hidden agendas about what you're trying to do. It's a real human puzzle.
Absolutely. It really is. And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We're going to explore this really powerful concept that helps you manage exactly that human challenge, figuring out who matters in any big plan or projects you undertake, and crucially, how to get them to actually support you. We're talking about something called Project Stakeholder Management.
Right. And think of it maybe as learning the secret language of influence and collaboration. Our mission in this deep dive is really to give you a shortcut, almost like a cheat code, if you will, to understanding how to identify and connect with and maybe even inspire the people who can either make your project a huge success or, well, a major headache. We'll be pulling insights from some pretty important project management documents, the kind that big companies use. But don't worry, we'll make it as simple and relatable as possible. We'll use examples from your world, with a dash of Indian flavor, of course.
Exactly. So get ready to unpack some really fascinating insights. I think this will literally change the way you look at teamwork, leadership, even just getting things done day to day, whether it's your science fair project or something much bigger down the line. Let's jump in. Okay, let's unpack this then. When we talk about stakeholder management, it sounds a bit formal, maybe, but at its heart, it's really all about understanding and working with people, right? So to start us off, who exactly are these stakeholders we're talking about?
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. At its core, it's very, very human. Simply put, stakeholders are, any people or groups or even organizations that can either impact your project. Meaning, they can make it easier or harder for you to achieve what you want, or they can be impacted by it. And that impact could be positive or it could be negative. They basically have a stake in what you're doing, which just means they have an interest or some involvement or maybe something to gain or lose from your project. Think of it like this. If you're baking a cake, the person who eats it, they're a stakeholder because they're impacted. But the person who sells you the ingredients, they're also a stakeholder because they impact whether you can even bake the cake.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The baker and the eater. So really bring this to life. Let's imagine we're planning a truly grand project today. Let's say we're organizing the Grand Community Diwali Mela, a huge school and community festival. We're talking food stalls, cultural performances, games, maybe even a small fireworks display. Big stuff. So if we're putting together this fantastic Diwali Mela, who would be our stakeholders? Who are the people with a stake in its success? Or maybe its failure?
Oh, that's a brilliant example. Perfect for understanding stakeholders. Okay, so for Diwali Mela, your stakeholders would definitely include the students.
Right.
They're performing, they're volunteering, they're attending. They want fun, good food, maybe a chance to shine on stage. The parents, they might be volunteering, bringing their kids, maybe contributing funds. Or they could just be concerned about safety, timings, things like that. Teachers and the school administration, absolutely key. They need to approve the event, provide the space, oversee the activities, make sure it fits with school values. The principal, huge stakeholder.
Yeah, definitely.
Then you've got local vendors, the caterers bringing the food, the artists setting up stalls, the sound and light guys. They want to make a profit, sure, but also showcase their work. Local community members, even people not directly linked to the school. They might be affected by, say, noise or traffic, or they might just want to come and enjoy the Mela as visitors.
Yeah.
You've also got emergency services, the local police or fire department. You need to let them know for safety, crowd control. The local media, maybe they want to cover the event. That could be great publicity. Or maybe bring unwanted attention if something goes wrong.
Right. Good or bad.
And don't forget the sponsors. Anyone putting money into the Mela, they're investing, they want to see their brand promoted. Each one of these groups or individuals has a stake, an interest, an involvement, something potentially at risk in our Diwali Mela project.
Wow, okay, that's actually a lot more people than I first thought. It goes way beyond just the organizing committee. So why does all this matter so much? Why is identifying and managing these people so important? Does it really make that big a difference between a spectacular Mela and, well, a complete flop?
Oh, it makes all the difference. Seriously. Think about it. When people study why projects fail, even massive ones like building a new bridge or launching a new phone, they consistently find a major reason is a lack of proper stakeholder management. It comes up again and again. If we don't understand and involve these people for our Diwali Mela, even the most brilliant idea can just crash and burn. Imagine if the principal suddenly pulls the funding because they weren't kept in the loop.
Oh yeah, nightmare.
Or if parents start complaining loudly about safety and pull their kids out. Or maybe the food vendor just doesn't show up because there was a miscommunication about the date. The entire event, no matter how well planned it looked on paper, it would just fall apart. So yes, absolutely. It's often the difference between success and those awful oh no moments that make you wish you just stayed home.
Yeah, it sounds like trying to put on a play where the actors haven't read the script, the director's vanished, and the audience isn't sure when to clap. You could have the most beautiful stage set, but the performance it won't happen. Without really understanding and involving these people, the best ideas can just, fail to launch.
Precisely. Exactly
Right.
that. Now, to help us manage this complex web of human connections, project management experts have broken down stakeholder management into 4 core pillars or processes. They often happen in a sequence, sort of one after the other, but in real life, they frequently overlap, a bit like, cooking different dishes for a big family dinner. You're doing multiple things at once.
Right. And we've given them some fun Indian-inspired names to help us remember them. So the first pillar is identify stakeholders, or Pechan Khan, which means who are they? It's all about finding out who these important people are, the detective work.
Exactly. Then comes planned stakeholder engagement, or Kayaz Bat Kareen. How should we talk to them? This is where we figure out the best ways to communicate and involve each of them effectively.
Okay. And after that, we have managed stakeholder engagement, or Sathmine Challenge. Let's walk together. This sounds like the action part, where you actually work with them, keep them involved, solve problems as they pop up during the project.
That's it. And finally, monitor stakeholder engagement, or Nazar Rakhna, keep an eye on them, or maybe keep watch. This is about continuously watching how things are going, making sure people are still engaged, and tweaking your approach as needed.
Right. It's important to remember, though, like you said about the cooking analogy, while we talk about them as separate steps, in real life, they just flow into each other, like preparing a delicious multi-course Indian meal. You don't just finish cooking the dal completely before you even start chopping the vegetables for the sabzi, right? You're often juggling, refining different parts at the same time, kneading dough for rotis while the rice cooks.
That's a perfect analogy, exactly. And here's a really powerful insight, something that often gets overlooked, I think. Stakeholder satisfaction should always be a project objective.
Stakeholder satisfaction as an objective.
Yes. It sounds almost too obvious, doesn't it? Keep people happy.
Yeah.
But achieving that satisfaction isn't just about avoiding problems. It's actually a strategic pathway. It can unlock hidden resources, give you early warnings on risks, even turn people who might have been against your project into its biggest supporters. The real magic, if you like, happens when you realize their happiness isn't just a side effect of your work, it's a driver of its success. And this is why continuous communication is just absolutely critical. Non-stop talking. You need to keep talking to all stakeholders, including your own team members, obviously, to understand their needs, their expectations, address issues as soon as they arise, manage any conflicting interests, and just generally foster their appropriate involvement in decisions and activities.
Okay, so it's definitely not a one-time checklist, not just, okay, talk to everyone, I'm done. Because people's feelings, their situations, they change, right? Like for our Diwali Mela, maybe when we move from planning the stalls to the actual event day, the concerns of the food vendors might totally change. Suddenly they're worried about the weather, or if they have enough helpers.
Exactly right. The whole process, identifying, engaging, it's iterative, meaning you constantly go back, review, update your approach regularly. You should definitely do this when your project moves through different phases, like from building the Mela stalls to actually running the performances. Also, when new people join or leave your project community, like new families move into the area, old families move out, new students join the school, and absolutely when significant changes happen in the community or the organization, maybe a new society president gets elected or new local rules about event noise come in, you've got to adapt.
You know, when I first thought about stakeholders, my mind went straight to the really obvious ones, the team, the principal, the parents. But I've heard that definition is getting much, much broader now. It's not just the clear-cut ones anymore. What does that actually mean for us on the ground, planning our Melessa? What are the trends here?
That's a fantastic question because, yeah, the traditional view, just employees, suppliers, shareholders, that's really evolving. Now, the definition includes a much wider range of groups. Much wider. We're talking about regulators like the city officials who give you the permits for the Mela.
Right, the permit guys.
We're talking about lobby groups and maybe a local cultural association that promotes traditional arts and wants to make sure they're represented properly at the Mela. We include environmentalists. Maybe they're concerned about the waste management from all the food stalls and visitors.
Okay, yeah.
And even the media, local newspapers, and maybe social media influencers. They can totally shape public opinion about your event. And crucially, it also includes people who simply believe they are affected by your project. Whether they actually are or not doesn't always matter. Their perception is their reality.
Wow, so even if they're wrong, they're still a stakeholder.
In a sense, yes, because their perception can still cause real problems or create opportunities. The key is identifying all potential stakeholders, not just a limited list, because even perceived impacts need to be managed.
Okay, so for our Diwali Mela, it's not just the students and parents. Maybe there's a local community group promoting literacy who would love a book stall. Or, like you said, an elderly resident nearby who really values peace and quiet and might be worried about the noise from the performances. Even the local newspaper reporter who might cover the story. They can influence how the community sees the Mela, good or bad.
That's spot on, perfectly spot on. And another big trend is the concept of co-creation. This is huge now. It means inviting affected stakeholders, like for a library, the future young readers, for our Mela, maybe the student artists or local community elders to be partners in designing the event, not just telling them what you've decided.
So involving them right from the start.
Exactly. This approach places way more emphasis on including them in the planning team from the very beginning. It builds trust, it gives them a sense of ownership, it gets them genuinely excited about the project, and that makes them far more likely to support it, maybe even become its biggest champions.
And there's real, actual value in all this engagement, isn't there? It's not just a nice to do, it literally impacts the success or failure. You said you can capture value, positive and negative.
Yeah.
How does that work? It's easy to think of these soft skills like engagement as hard to measure. But you're saying you can measure the value.
Yes, absolutely. Positive value comes from higher levels of active support from stakeholders, especially those powerful ones who can really, really help you. Imagine the principal offering extra school resources because they feel involved and excited, or a local business sponsoring the entire fireworks display because you engaged them early and got them passionate about the Mela. That's real positive value.
Okay, I see that.
On the flip side, you can also measure the negative value, the actual costs of not engaging stakeholders effectively. This could lead to things like, in a business context, product recalls if a product doesn't meet customer needs because they weren't consulted, or a huge loss of reputation for your organization or project that costs a fortune to repair. For a Mela, if the students aren't engaged in the planning, maybe they just won't show up, low attendance. If the school management wasn't consulted properly from the start, maybe they cut off funding halfway through.
Ouch, yeah.
These are real, tangible losses, not just abstract ideas. But conversely, active engagement builds what you could call social capital that can fast-track approvals, open doors to new partnerships, even generate free positive publicity. All of that has a measurable return on investment, even if it's not immediately obvious on a spreadsheet.
Okay, so it's crystal clear that one size definitely doesn't fit all here. You absolutely need to tailor your approach. What kinds of things should a project manager keep in mind when tailoring, especially for something as diverse as our Diwali Mela with so many different groups?
Right, tailoring is key. Project managers need to adapt based on several factors. First, stakeholder diversity. How many people are involved? And, crucially, how different are their backgrounds, their cultures? For our Diwali Mela, you've got students from different grades, parents maybe speaking different regional languages, teachers with varied expectations, maybe local community leaders with their own cultural customs, their needs, their priorities, how they prefer to communicate it all vary widely. You have to respect that.
That totally clicks. Like you'd send a formal letter to the principal, right? But maybe a quick emoji-filled WhatsApp message to the student volunteers, and perhaps a face-to-face meeting with community elders. All very different, but all necessary.
Precisely. Second, you need to consider the complexity of relationships. Are people friends? Rivals? Connected through many different groups? Misinformation can spread like wildfire in complex networks. If there's a misunderstanding between, say, two influential parent groups, or a rumor starts among the students, it can derail your Mela plans really quickly. Understanding those social dynamics is vital.
The grapevine effect.
Exactly. Third, think about communication technology. What's available? What are people comfortable using? Are WhatsApp groups best for quick updates? Do some older parents prefer traditional notice boards? Are face-to-face meetings absolutely essential for resolving serious issues? And also, what systems are in place to make sure you get the best value from whatever tech you choose? For our Mela, you might need a mix of the school announcement system, maybe a special Mela app, and regular committee meetings.
And what about projects that move really fast? Like in those agile or adaptive environments where things change all the time. Does stakeholder management change much there?
Oh, absolutely. Projects with a high degree of change where you need to adapt super rapidly, they require active, direct, and very frequent engagement. Agile methods often promote what they call aggressive transparency.
Aggressive transparency sounds intense.
It kind of is. It means things like inviting stakeholders directly to project meetings, sharing updates very openly, maybe even posting project details on a big, visible whiteboard where everyone can see it. The whole idea is to surface any misalignment, any dependency, any issue as quickly as humanly possible. Imagine our Diwali Mela team having a quick 15-minute stand-up meeting every single morning. Student leaders, a teacher rep, maybe someone from a local sponsor briefly sharing what I did yesterday, what I'm doing today, any roadblocks.
Okay, quick check-ins.
Yeah, and this aggressive transparency, inviting stakeholders right into these huddles, having public progress boards, it means nobody can really say, oh, I didn't know about that. It's designed to catch even the tiniest misalignment early. Like maybe a sponsor suddenly changes their branding requirements, or the local council has a new permit process you didn't know about. By making everything visible, issues get caught in minutes or hours, not weeks later when they're expensive to fix. It drastically cuts down on costly rework, and it builds an incredible amount of trust because everyone sees the real-time progress and the challenges. It fosters a culture of immediate adaptation.
All right, that brings us perfectly to segment 2. The detective work begins. This is step 1, Pet Shan Khan, identifying your secret superheroes and maybe villains. So tell us, what's this process really all about, and why is it so crucial to get it right from the start?
All right. This process is all about regularly playing detective, like you said. You're identifying your project stakeholders and then really digging deep, analyzing and documenting important stuff about them. You're looking at their interests, how involved they are, any dependencies, do they rely on others, do others rely on them? You're assessing their influence over your project and their potential impact, positive or negative, on your Diwali Mela's success. The key benefit here is knowing who to focus your limited time and energy on, making sure you don't waste time on people who don't matter that much, and crucially, ensuring you don't miss those critical few who could genuinely make or break your Mela. It's like knowing who the real decision makers are versus who just likes to, talk a lot.
Got it. So it's like being a detective, trying to figure out everyone connected to your case, our Grand Diwali Mela. When does this detective work typically happen? Is it just a one-time thing at the beginning, or more like an ongoing investigation?
Oh, it's definitely an ongoing investigation, for sure. This process often happens for the very first time, even before your project fully kicks off. Or maybe at the same time, the project charter, your Mela's official launch document, is being created and approved.
Okay, so right at the start.
Yes, but it's absolutely not a one-and-done deal. People change, situations change. It gets repeated as necessary throughout the entire project lifecycle, especially at the start of each new phase of the Mela, or whenever a really significant change happens in the Mela plan, or maybe in the school organization itself. And each time you repeat this identification process, you should be consulting all your current Mela plans and documents to see if there are any new stakeholders or if existing ones have changed somehow.
Okay, so we're being detectives. What kind of information do we need to start our investigation? What are the crucial inputs for this identification process for the Diwali Mela?
Good question. There are several key pieces of information we need to gather. First, as I mentioned, you have the project charter. This is like the official launch document, maybe the formal approval memo from the principal's office for your Diwali Mela. It usually names some key initial stakeholders like the head teacher in charge, maybe the student council president, and often outlines their basic responsibilities. It's your first official map, really.
Okay, so the charter gives you a starting point, a few key names. What else is on our detective's checklist?
Next up, we look at business documents, specifically the business case and the benefits management plan. The business case tells you the why behind your Mela. What are its objectives? Is it mainly to raise funds for a specific charity, or is it more about promoting cultural understanding? It often identifies an initial list of stakeholders who are affected by these objectives, like the chosen charity itself, or maybe the different cultural groups participating.
Okay, the why and who benefits.
Exactly. And the benefits management plan describes how the Mela is expected to deliver its value, and it specifically identifies who is supposed to benefit. So, for the Mela, it would list who benefits: the students learning about traditions, the charity getting funds, the community enjoying the event, perhaps even the school gaining a positive reputation. This helps us find people who will naturally be interested because they stand to gain something.
And what about the project management plan itself? Does that feed into this early stage?
Well, not usually right at the very beginning when you're doing the initial stakeholder identification, simply because the full plan hasn't been developed yet.
Oh, okay, makes sense.
But once it has been developed, components like the communications management plan and the stakeholder engagement plan become absolutely crucial inputs for ongoing identification. Communications and stakeholder engagement are so strongly linked, right? So these plans provide really rich sources of knowledge about your existing stakeholders and how you're already planning to interact with them. As your Mela project progresses, these plans become essential maps, guiding your continuous identification efforts.
Right. And then there are other project documents that pop up as the project moves along. What kind of documents might give us clues later on?
Yes, exactly. Again, these aren't typically available for the initial sweep, but they become vital as the project gets rolling. For example, the change log. This log tracks all approved changes to the project. A change might introduce a totally new stakeholder, or it might change the nature of an existing stakeholder's relationship with the project. Like, if a new change comes up, say, deciding to add a big Rangoli competition to the Diwali Mela, that might suddenly bring in a new art teacher as a key stakeholder. Or it might change the role or importance of the existing art club members.
Okay, so changes bring new people or change roles.
Precisely. Similarly, the issue log records problems or conflicts that arise. Issues can reveal new stakeholders you hadn't thought of, or they might change the participation level of existing ones. If there's an issue like, say, not having enough volunteers for the Mela food stalls, you might suddenly realize you need to actively reach out to parent volunteers, who then become important new stakeholders to manage. Also, requirements documentation. This lists what the project needs to deliver. It can provide information on potential stakeholders who have specific needs or expectations for the Mela's outcomes, like specific food preferences for dietary reasons or cultural requirements for stage performances.
Gotcha. So these documents basically help you keep up with the dynamics, the moving parts of a project, and how it affects the people involved. What about agreements, like contracts?
Yes. Agreements like contracts with vendors or maybe partnership agreements are also crucial inputs. The parties to an agreement are definitely project stakeholders. That's a given. So any agreements with the caterer for the Mela's food stalls or the sound system provider for the main stage, they become key stakeholders because their performance directly impacts the Mela's success. And sometimes the agreement itself might even contain references to other stakeholders you hadn't considered initially. Maybe the sound system contract mentions needing a specific permit from the city noise control department. Boom, another stakeholder.
Okay. Now this next one sounds a bit broader. Enterprise environmental factors. What exactly falls under this category for our Diwali Mela? It sounds like everything else.
It can feel that way sometimes. These are basically things outside your direct Mela organizing team that can influence your project and its stakeholders. It's the context. This includes the school's overall organizational culture, maybe it's a very traditional school, or a very modern tech-savvy one. That affects how people behave and communicate. It also includes the political climate within your school or the wider community. Are there any ongoing rivalries or power struggles between departments or parent groups that might affect participation or support for the Mela?
School politics, right?
Yeah. Yep. Then there are government rules or industry standards like fire safety regulations for public gatherings, which are super important for a Mela. Global or local trends, maybe a big community push for eco-friendly events would influence your Mela's waste management plan and maybe attract environmental groups as stakeholders. Even the geographic distribution of facilities and resources, like where exactly are the Mela grounds located relative to the school entrance or parking, that can impact traffic flow and accessibility for different stakeholders. All these external factors shape who your stakeholders are and how they might react. You need to be aware of them.
Okay. And finally, organizational process assets. This sounds like internal stuff, resources within the school. What kind of goldmine is this for our Mela detective work?
Exactly. These are resources within your organization, usually coming from previous projects, like a treasure chest of past experience. Think of a lessons learned repository from last year's annual day, or maybe the school sports meet.
The what went wrong last time file?
Precisely. This repository might contain invaluable information about the preferences, the actions, the involvement levels of stakeholders from past experiences. Who was super helpful? Who caused problems? What communication methods worked best with parents? The school might have a document from last year's Mela saying, always consult the local police very early for large events, or parents prefer online signups for volunteering, not paper forms. This kind of information is pure gold for identifying potential new stakeholders or understanding the likely behavior of existing ones. It can save you a ton of time and help you avoid repeating past mistakes.
Okay, brilliant. Now that we know what information we need to gather, how do we actually find and then understand these people? What are the tools and techniques for this detective work to build our Diwali Mela's stakeholder list?
Good question. Lots of tools in the detective kit here. First up, and maybe most obviously, expert judgment. This makes a lot of sense, right? You seek specialized knowledge from individuals or groups who really understand the dynamics, the politics, the power structures in your school or local community. They might have deep knowledge of the school's environment and culture, including different student groups or other affected organizations like the PTA. They might also be experts in organizing similar events, or they might simply know the specific contributions and expertise of individual teachers or key community members.
So, talking to the wise owls.
Exactly. Talking to your senior teacher who's organized the Mela for 10 years running, or the school head boy or head girl who knows all the student dynamics, or even the principal who really understands the politics of the school committees. That's expert judgment. They can tell you things like, oh, you absolutely must talk to Mrs. Sharma early on. She runs the main parent volunteer group and can make or break your volunteer numbers.
Got it. Then there's data gathering. How do you actually collect information from various sources to find all these potential stakeholders?
Right, several data gathering techniques here. You've got questionnaires and surveys. These can be anything from one-on-one interviews to focus group sessions with specific groups, like just the student performers, or even mass information collection using online forms or paper surveys. For our Mela, you could send out a quick survey on the school WhatsApp group or maybe a Google form asking students what kind of stalls they want or what cultural performances they'd like to see. That helps identify interests.
Okay, surveys. What else?
Another key technique is brainstorming. This can include both traditional brainstorming and something called brainwriting. Brainstorming is just a general technique to get ideas and input from groups, like your core Mela team or maybe some subject matter experts like teachers. So sitting down with your core organizing team and just listing every single person or group who might possibly be involved, from the security guard at the gate to the chief guest you hope to invite, that's brainstorming.
Just getting it all out there.
Exactly. Now, brainwriting is a fantastic refinement, especially if you're in a group where maybe some people talk more than others. Instead of just shouting out ideas, everyone quietly spends, say, 5 minutes writing down their own top 5 ideas or potential stakeholders on sticky notes. Then you collect all the notes and group them.
Oh, interesting. Why is that better sometimes?
It's powerful because it helps prevent groupthink, where everyone just agrees with the first few ideas mentioned. It also encourages more introverted team members to contribute their ideas equally, and it usually generates a wider, more original range of potential stakeholders before any discussion even begins. This can lead to finding people you might otherwise have missed.
Okay, cool technique. So once you've gathered all this data from experts, surveys, brainstorming, you need to make sense of it all. That's where data analysis comes in, right?
Yes, absolutely. And this is where stakeholder analysis specifically is absolutely crucial. This isn't just listing names, it's digging deeper. You deep dive into their stakes. What do they actually have to gain or lose from your Mela? This includes analyzing their interests. How are they affected? What do they care about? For the Mela, a student might be interested in performing on stage. A parent might be interested in a safe, fun event for their kids. Rights. Do they have legal rights, like safety regulations for staff, or maybe moral rights, like local vendors wanting fair access to stalls? Ownership. Do they own property or assets related to the project? The school owns the grounds. The caterer owns their kitchen equipment. Knowledge. Do you have special knowledge that could really benefit the Mela? Maybe the local tailor knows all about traditional costumes for performances, or the art teacher is an expert in Rangoli designs.
Specific expertise.
Contribution. What can they contribute? This could be funds, physical resources, volunteer time, or even intangible support like advocating for the Mela or acting as a buffer between your team and, say, complaining neighbors. Parents might contribute funds, volunteers might promote the event on social media. Alongside this stakeholder analysis, we also use document analysis. That means systematically reviewing all the existing project documents we talked about earlier, the charter, past event reports, school policies, to identify stakeholders and find supporting information about their interests and influence.
Wow, that's a lot of detail about each person or group. Now, how do you visualize all this information? You can't just keep it all in your head. That's data representation, right? Like drawing a map of our Diwali Mela stakeholder universe.
That's a great way to put it. Exactly. This is all about categorizing stakeholders in a visual way to help you understand the landscape, build relationships, and plan your strategies. Common methods include the power interest grid, or you might see similar grids called power influence or impact influence grids. This is a simple but really effective way to group people based on two key dimensions: their power, their ability to influence your Mela, to help or hinder it, and their interest, how much they care about the Mela's outcomes.
Okay, power and interest. How would that look for our Mela?
Right. So for our Diwali Mela, the principal, definitely high power, probably high interest too. You need to manage them closely, keep them satisfied.
It's happy, yeah.
Your classmates, you just want to come and have fun. Probably low power individually, but high interest. You need to keep them informed, maybe get their feedback on activities. What about the electricity board? Probably high power, they control the lights, but likely low interest, unless of course there's a power cut during the Mela. So you manage them based on their needs, make sure there are no roadblocks from their side. And maybe the local fruit vendor, who might set up a small stall, could be low power, maybe low interest overall, but you might want to engage them if you need that type of stall. These grids are fantastic for smaller projects or where the relationships aren't too complicated. They really help you prioritize where to focus your limited time and effort. You can't give everyone the same level of attention.
Right, that makes sense. It helps you figure out who needs the most hand-holding or the most frequent updates. Are there more complex ways to categorize stakeholders, maybe for a really big, messy Mela?
Yes, absolutely. For more complex projects or when you have tons of stakeholders with really intricate relationships, you might use other models. There's the stakeholder cube. This is basically a 3D version of the grid, adding a third dimension like attitude, supportive resistant, or maybe influence pathway. It gives a richer picture of the stakeholder community.
A cube, okay.
Then there's the salience model. This one classifies stakeholders based on 3 attributes: their power, ability to impose their will, their urgency, how quickly they need attention, like a permit deadline looming, and their legitimacy, is their involvement appropriate and recognized. This model is really useful for very large, complex stakeholder communities or where relationships are super tangled. It helps determine their relative importance, their salience, and figure out who truly demands your focus right now.
Power, urgency, legitimacy. Got it.
You can also classify stakeholders by their directions of influence. This helps you think about where the influence is coming from or going to. Upward, towards senior management like the principal, the school board, people you report to or need approval from. Downward, towards your own team members or specialists working on the Mela, other students organizing specific activities, maybe choreographers for the dance performances. Outward, towards groups outside your immediate project team, parents, the general public attending, the media, local police, suppliers, sponsors. Sideward, towards your peers, maybe other teachers organizing different school events at the same time, or other student leaders you need to coordinate with, perhaps showing resources for the Mela.
Up, down, out, sideways, like a compass.
Kind of. And finally, prioritization itself is a key data representation technique, especially when you have a huge number of stakeholders or the list changes frequently or the relationships are really complex. It simply helps you decide who is most important to engage with first, second, third, because realistically, you just can't be everywhere at once.
Makes sense. And of course, I imagine good old meetings are a tool here too, not just the formal sit-down ones, but maybe informal chats as well.
You're absolutely right. Meetings are essential. They're used to develop a much deeper understanding of the significant project stakeholders. These can be formal, facilitated workshops with the entire MELA committee present. They could be small group guided discussions with, say, just the student leaders from different grades. Or they could be really informal, chai pe churcha, discussions over tea with key teachers to get their honest insights and understand their underlying concerns. Even virtual groups using online tools or social media platforms to share ideas and analyze stakeholder data fall under this category. The main goal is always to gather diverse perspectives and build some consensus on who the key players really are for your MELA mall.
Okay, so after all this intensive detective work, using expert surveys, brainstorming, analysis, mapping, meetings, what do you actually get at the end? What are the tangible outputs? What are the results of identifying your Diwali MELA stakeholders?
The main output, the absolute cornerstone, is the stakeholder register. Think of this as your essential Rolodex or your master contacts list, specifically for your Diwali MELA project. It's the key document. It contains all the identified stakeholders' information, typically including identification info, their name, their position in the organization, for example, school principal, head of PTA, class 10 student rep, their contact details, and their specific role on the MELA project, if any. Assessment info. Their major requirements and expectations for the MELA. What do they need or want from it? Also, your assessment of their potential influence on the MELA's outcomes. And maybe the phase of the project where they matter most. For example, parents might be most influential during the event itself, while the principal is absolutely key during the initial planning and approval phases. Classification. How you've categorized them using those tools we discussed, internal, external, their position on the power interest grid, upward, downward influence, etc. This register isn't static, it's your living guide. It's a critical reference point that you'll keep coming back to and updating throughout the entire MELA project.
Okay, so that's your master list, the comprehensive map of your MELA stakeholder universe. Super important. What else might come out of this process of identifying stakeholders?
Well, you might also generate change requests. If, during your identification process, you uncover a completely new stakeholder, or you get some significant new information about an existing one. And that new information means you need to change the MELA's scope, what you're delivering, or its budget, or its timeline. Then you typically need to submit a formal change request to get that modification approved. For instance, maybe you discover a local environmental NGO is very interested in partnering with your Diwali MELA for a major recycling initiative. That's great. But it might mean you need to add a whole new section to your MELA plan, maybe request extra space or volunteers. That would likely require a formal change request.
Right, because it changes the original plan. Okay. And finally, you mentioned project management plan updates and project documents updates. How does identification feed back into those?
Yes. Now, initially, when you first create the stakeholder register, these other plans might not exist yet or might be very basic. But as the MELA project progresses and you periodically re-identify or reassess stakeholders, you'll almost certainly need to adjust your existing plans based on what you learn. This could include updating how you plan to manage requirements if new needs emerge, or how you'll communicate with different groups, your communications plan, or how you'll manage risks if new stakeholder-related risks appear, your risk management plan, or, of course, updating the stakeholder engagement plan itself.
So the plans evolve.
Exactly. And similarly, other project documents might need updating. Your assumption log, for instance, maybe you initially assumed all parents would be happy to volunteer, but now you realize you need an active recruitment drive. That assumption needs updating. Your issue log might get new entries related to stakeholder concerns. Your risk register might need new risks added or existing ones reassessed based on stakeholder feedback or behavior. This constant updating ensures your plans stay alive and relevant, adapting to the reality on the ground. It also makes sure that everything you've learned about your MELA's stakeholders is captured not just for this year, but potentially making next year's MELA planning even smoother. For example, realizing you absolutely need monthly newsletters for parents because feedback showed they felt out of the loop that learning gets baked into the updated communication plan.
All right, fantastic. So we've done our detective work, we've identified our stakeholders for the Diwali MELA. Now we move smoothly into segment 3. This is step 2, Kaisi Batkarin. Planning your engagement strategy. Expert, this sounds like where we actually craft our blueprint for how we're going to interact with everyone we identified. What's the main goal here?
That's exactly right. It's about crafting your engagement blueprint. This process is all about developing specific, carefully tailored approaches to involve your stakeholders. And these approaches need to be based on their unique needs, their expectations, their interests, and importantly, their potential impact, positive or negative, on your MELA. The key benefit here, the main thing you get out of it, is an actionable plan. Not just some vague idea like talk to parents more. It's specific.
It's actionable, okay.
Yeah. It's like deciding precisely how you'll communicate with each key person or group. Do you call them? Send a WhatsApp message, schedule a formal meeting, send an email newsletter. It all depends on them, on their preferences, and on what level of engagement you actually need from them for the MELA to succeed.
Right. So now that we know who everyone is from our detective work in step 1, this is all about planning how we'll talk to each of them, how we'll involve them. When does this planning typically happen? And is it also an ongoing thing, like identification?
Good question. The initial plan is usually developed quite early in the project lifecycle, typically right after the initial stakeholders have been identified using the methods we just discussed.
So pretty early on.
Yes. But just like identification, this plan is absolutely not set in stone. It should be reviewed and updated regularly. Why? Because the stakeholder community itself might change. New people arrive, others leave. Or maybe your Diwali MELA project progresses into a new phase, like moving from planning the stalls to actually booking the performers, which might require different engagement levels from different people. Changes in the school or the local community might happen, or maybe outputs from other MELA planning processes like risk management, identifying a new stakeholder-related risk, might trigger a need to review your engagement strategies. So yes, it's very much a living document, constantly adapting to the MELA's journey.
Okay. And what information do you need to feed into this plan? What are the essential inputs for crafting this engagement blueprint for our Diwali MELA?
Right. This process heavily builds on the outputs from step 1, identify stakeholders. Your stakeholder register is a truly crucial input here. That's your detailed list of who's who, their roles, their interests, their initial classification, like power interest. That's foundational.
The register is key.
Absolutely. You also need information from various components of your overall project management plan. For example, the resource management player. This tells you who on your MELA organizing team is actually available and responsible for engaging with which specific stakeholder or group. You need to know who's doing the talking. The communications management plan. This guides how you'll generally communicate across the entire MELA project, maybe outlining preferred channels or frequencies. Your engagement plan needs to align with this. The risk management plan. This might contain risk thresholds or specific risks related to stakeholders that influence your engagement approach. For example, if a particular vendor is identified as high risk, your engagement plan might specify more frequent check-ins or stricter oversight for them.
Okay, makes sense. Using the other plans.
Yes, and other project documents also provide critical context. Things like the assumption log, what are we assuming about stakeholder willingness? The change log, what changes might affect engagement needs? The issue log, what current problems involve stakeholders? The project schedule, when do we need input or action from stakeholders? And the risk register, what specific stakeholder risks need managing through engagement? Even things like agreements with external parties, what communication is contractually required. Enterprise environmental factors like local laws about public gatherings impacting how you engage neighbors, and organizational process assets like feedback from last year's MELA on what engagement worked best continue to provide vital context for tailoring your engagement strategies effectively. It's really about bringing together everything you've learned so far to create a smart, informed plan.
Right, so it's all about consolidating that knowledge.
Yeah.
Now let's talk tools and techniques again. How do you actually design your engagement strategy for the Diwali MELA? What helps you build this plan?
Okay, tools and techniques for planning engagement. Again, expert judgment is really key. You can't beat experience here. You'd consult individuals who have experience in, say, school politics, understanding community culture, designing effective communication strategies, or maybe just have track records for managing past successful events.
The wise owls again.
Exactly. You might be asking the most popular student in your class, hey, how do you usually get people to agree with your ideas? That's expert judgment. Or asking a senior teacher, what's the absolute best way to approach the PTA, Parent-Teacher Association, if we need volunteers? Their insights into people's personalities, motivations, and what works in your specific school context are invaluable for planning.
Okay, and what about data gathering techniques specifically for planning engagement?
Here, a useful technique is benchmarking. This involves comparing your MELA's stakeholder analysis and your proposed engagement approaches with other similar successful projects. maybe other school events or community festivals in your area, or even elsewhere. Looking at how other schools successfully organize their big charity drives or their annual day functions, what did they do specifically to involve parents or local businesses effectively? What worked well, what didn't? That's benchmarking. You learn from the successes and failures of others rather than reinventing the wheel.
Makes sense. Learn from others. Now, for data analysis, you mentioned assumption and constraint analysis and root cause analysis before. How do these specifically help in planning the engagement part for the MELA?
Good question. Assumption and constraint analysis is about double-checking your assumptions regarding stakeholders. For example, are you assuming everyone will love the idea of having only traditional Indian food stalls at the MELA? What if some students or parents actually prefer pizza or noodles? What if you assumed a specific group of senior students would volunteer for setup, but you then realize they're all swamped with board exam prep? That's a constraint. Understanding these assumptions and the limitations or constraints you face, like budget, time, or resource availability, helps you tailor your engagement approach much better and avoid potential missteps or unmet expectations.
Let's check in your blind spots.
Exactly. And root cause analysis helps you understand why some stakeholders might be less supportive or even resistant before you finalize your engagement plan. What's the real reason, the root cause, if a particular student group isn't signing up to participate? Maybe they feel their creative ideas were ignored last year, or maybe they had a really bad experience volunteering for a previous event. Understanding that root cause helps you choose the right strategy to genuinely improve their engagement, rather than just making assumptions or applying a generic approach that might not work.
Oh, okay, so once you have all this analysis, you need to make some decisions about how to proceed.
Yes, and that often involves prioritization ranking again, but this time specifically for engagement efforts. You need to decide which stakeholders are the most critical to engage with first, and perhaps with what level of intensity or frequency. Generally, those stakeholders who score high on both interest and influence, like the principal in our MELA example, are often prioritized at the very top of the list for focused engagement efforts. Why? Because they can significantly impact your MELA's success, for better or worse. So the principal and the main student organizers would likely get more frequent and direct communication planned for them compared to, say, a casual visitor who might just get a general announcement.
Right, focusing your energy. And how do you visualize these engagement plans? You mentioned data representation tools again.
Yes, tools like mind mapping can be really useful here. You can visually organize all the information about stakeholders, their relationships to each other, their connection to different parts of the MELA project, and your planned engagement actions for each. It helps see the whole picture.
Like a relationship map.
Kind of, yeah. But a truly powerful tool specifically for planning engagement is the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. This matrix is designed to help you compare the current engagement level of your key stakeholders with the desired level of engagement you actually need from them for your MELA to be successful.
Okay, this sounds really practical. This is where we classify how engaged people are right now versus how engaged we need them to be. Can you walk us through those engagement levels again, maybe using our Diwali MELA examples? It seems like it would really help focus the strategy.
Certainly. This matrix typically uses 5 key engagement levels. Unaware. These stakeholders basically have no idea about your Diwali MELA project or its potential impacts on them. Maybe some neighbors living a few streets away from the school, or perhaps new families who just moved into the area and haven't seen any announcements yet. Your strategy for them might just be simple awareness building.
Okay, oblivious.
Resistant. They are aware of the project and its potential impacts, but they are actively resistant to the changes it might bring, or maybe even actively unsupportive of the MELA itself. This could be that elderly resident who genuinely dislikes noise and is already worried about the MELA's fireworks display, or maybe a rival school event organizer who sees your MELA as competition. Your goal here is probably to move them from resistant towards at least neutral, if not supportive.
Actively against it.
Neutral. They are aware of the project, but they're neither supportive nor unsupportive. They might adopt a wait-and-see attitude. They might say something like, okay, fine, let me know if you need something specific, but they won't go out of their way to help or hinder you. This could be a casual teacher who just sees it as another routine school event they're not directly involved in. Supportive. They are aware of the project and its potential impacts, and they are generally supportive of the work and its intended outcomes. They think the MELA is a good idea. They might say, that sounds great, how can I help out? This could be a parent who readily offers to volunteer for a couple of hours at one of the stalls.
Bored.
Leading. Now these are your champions. These stakeholders are aware, supportive, and actively engaged in ensuring the project is a success. They are proactive, they take initiative, they might even rally others. Someone leading might say, okay, I've already convinced 5 of my friends to volunteer for the food stalls, and I've spoken to the local Hall Y, sweet shop owner, to see if we can get special discounts on mitai for the event. They are driving success.
Your star players.
Exactly. And the power of the matrix is that it usually plots both the current level of engagement for each stakeholder and the desired D level you need.
Okay. C versus D. The gap.
Precisely. The gap between where a stakeholder is right now, current C, and where you need them to be for the MELA's success, desired D, tells you exactly how much effort and what kind of effort you need to put into engaging them. For that resistant neighbor worried about noise, resistant C, you need a very different, probably more persuasive and reassuring engagement strategy than for your leading friend, leading C, who you might just need to keep informed and empowered. Closing this gap, strategically moving key stakeholders from their C to their required D level, is a crucial element of effective stakeholder engagement planning. It's where a lot of the smart thinking happens.
That's super helpful. A very practical tool. And as always, I assume meetings are part of the toolkit for planning too.
Of course. You can't play engagement in a vacuum. Meetings are used to discuss and analyze all the input data you've gathered for planning. And importantly, they're used to collaboratively develop a sound, agreed-upon stakeholder engagement plan with your core team. This could be a focused meeting with just the main MELA organizing committee to decide roles like who talks to the sponsors, who handles parent communications, how often should we update the principal. Or it could be a facilitated workshop involving student representatives from different houses or clubs to brainstorm creative ideas for communication and involvement. The main goal is to get everyone on the same page about how you're going to interact with all the MELA stakeholders in the most effective way.
Okay, great. So after all this detailed planning, using the analysis, the matrix, the meetings, what's the big output? What tangible thing do you get after crafting this engagement blueprint for our Diwali Mela?
The main output, the key deliverable from this process, is the stakeholder engagement plan. This plan becomes a specific component of your overall project management plan, and it formally identifies the specific strategies and actions required to promote productive involvement of stakeholders in decision-making and execution for your Diwali Mela. How are you going to get them involved and keep them involved? It can be formal or informal, it could be highly detailed or more broadly framed, depending on your project's specific needs and complexity.
Got it. So this is essentially your step-by-step guide for how to get everyone on board and keep them there. It might include specific notes like, for stakeholder X, the principal, the plan is. Send a concise weekly email update and schedule a brief monthly 10-minute check-in meeting. For stakeholder Y, the main volunteer group, the plan is. Create a dedicated WhatsApp group for daily updates and quick questions, and hold a weekly huddle just before their main shifts begin. It's like having a personalized communication and involvement strategy for every key person or group.
That's a brilliant way to describe it, yes. It's your living guide to how you'll actually make Sathmain Challenge walking together a reality. It ensures that everyone is approached in a way that respects their preferences, addresses their concerns proactively, and ultimately maximizes their willingness and ability to contribute positively to the Diwali Mela's success.
Which brings us perfectly then to segment 4. We've planned the engagement. Now it's time for step 3. Sathmain Challenge, working with your people. Expert, this is the doing part, isn't it? This is where we actually make the engagement plan a reality for our Diwali Mela.
That's absolutely right. This is exactly where the rubber meets the road, as they say. It's the process where you actively communicate and work directly with your stakeholders. Why? To meet their needs and expectations, to address issues as they inevitably come up, and to foster their appropriate involvement throughout the Mela project. The key benefit of doing this well is that it allows the project manager or the organizing team to significantly increase support for the Mela and, just as importantly, minimize resistance from those who might be skeptical or opposed.
Increasing support, minimizing resistance.
Okay. And unlike the earlier steps, which have a big focus at the beginning, this process, managed stakeholder engagement, is performed continuously throughout the entire Mela project lifecycle, from the very first planning meeting right through to the post-event cleanup and feedback gathering. It never really stops until the project is done.
Got it. So you've made your detailed Diwali Mela engagement plan, and now you're actually doing it. You're calling the caterer to confirm menus, meeting with the student dance group to check on rehearsals, answering parents' questions about safety procedures, maybe coordinating timings with the local police contact. What specific activities are typically involved in this doing part, this working together?
Yeah, it involves several key activities, day in and day out. First, you're actively engaging stakeholders at the appropriate stages of the Mela. The goal is to obtain, confirm, or sometimes maintain their continued commitment to the project's success. It's about getting their buy-in and then keeping it alive. Second, you're managing their expectations. This often involves ongoing negotiation and very clear communication. For example, if a parent group expects the MELA to have only purely vegetarian food stalls, but you need to include some non-veg options for broader appeal, you might need to negotiate or clearly explain the rationale and maybe offer compromises.
Managing expectations, right? Tricky sometimes.
Very tricky. Third, you're proactively addressing risks or potential concerns related to stakeholder management. And importantly, trying to anticipate future issues that might be raised. Like if you know one neighbor always complains about noise, you might proactively talk to them before the MELA about the planned schedule and noise levels. Or if you foresee a key volunteer group might become unavailable due to exams, you start looking for backups early. And finally, you're clarifying and actively resolving issues that have been identified and logged. Like if there was a miscommunication about the start time for the cultural performances, you need to sort that out quickly and communicate the correction clearly to everyone affected.
Why is this step so absolutely critical? It really sounds like it's where all the potential problems or the potential triumphs actually happen in real time.
It truly is. It's the execution phase of your people plan. This step is critical because it ensures that your stakeholders clearly understand the MELA's goals, its objectives, the benefits it aims to bring to them or others, and also any potential risks involved. Crucially, it clarifies how their specific individual contribution helps make the whole thing a success. Think about it. If the student dance group understands that their performance isn't just for fun, but it actually helps raise significant funds for the chosen charity and makes the MELA a much more vibrant and enjoyable event for everyone, they're far more likely to show up for all the rehearsals, put in their best effort, and feel proud of their contribution. When people understand their role and the value they bring, they're just much more likely to stay engaged, motivated, and supportive, even when things get tough.
That makes total sense. Connecting their part to the bigger picture. So, what inputs do you need to effectively manage this ongoing engagement? What information do you need at your fingertips day to day?
Right. For managing engagement effectively, you're essentially using almost everything you've created and gathered so far. It all comes together here. All your relevant project management plans are crucial guides, especially your communications management plan, detailing how you'll send out official notices about the MELA, handle inquiries, etc. Your risk management plan, reminding you of identified stakeholder-related risks, like potential protests or lack of volunteers and maybe the planned responses. Your stakeholder engagement plan. This is your core playbook, detailing the specific strategies for managing expectations and involvement for key stakeholders. And even your change management plan, guiding how you'll handle changes that inevitably arise from stakeholder interactions, like if a sponsor requests a last-minute change to their banner placement.
So constantly referring back to the plans.
Absolutely. And all your key project documents are also vital inputs. The change log, keeping track of what changes have occurred that might impact stakeholders. The issue log, what current problems involving stakeholders need active resolution. The lessons learned register, what worked well or badly in engaging similar stakeholders on past projects or earlier phases of this one. And of course, your essential stakeholder register, your up-to-date list of who everyone is, their interests, and their planned engagement level. You also continue to consider enterprise environmental factors like the general mood or events happening in the wider community that might affect stakeholder attitudes and organizational process assets, like maybe past MELA feedback reports or communication templates as they continue to influence how you interact with stakeholders on a daily basis. It's about using all available intelligence.
Okay, so you're armed with all your information and plans, ready to put them into action. What are the specific tools and techniques you use to actually do the working together part for the Diwali MELA? How do you make it happen effectively?
Great question. Tools for managing engagement. Once again, expert judgment remains very important, maybe even more so in this active phase. You'll likely seek advice on navigating tricky situations like organizational politics within the school. How do I approach head of department X about needing student volunteers during class time? Or on refining communication strategies for diverse groups. What's the best way to explain this complex schedule change to parents who speak different languages? Or maybe on how to effectively manage changing requirements or negotiate solutions when conflicts arise. For instance, knowing exactly how to talk to an angry parent about a perceived safety issue at the MELA, or how to constructively negotiate with a reluctant local business owner for sponsorship that often requires seasoned advice from someone who's been there before.
Right. Experience counts. And obviously, communication skills are absolutely vital here, particularly feedback. It's not just about talking to people, but really talking with them, listening to them.
Absolutely. You're actively applying the specific communication methods you outlined in your communications and engagement plans. But just as importantly, you're actively seeking feedback to understand stakeholder reactions, gauge their level of understanding, and pick up on any unspoken concerns or emerging issues. This feedback can be collected through various channels. Formal meetings, sure, but also informal conversations while setting up stalls, specific discussions focused on resolving issues, regular written progress reports, or even quick pulse check surveys sent out during the event planning.
Getting that feedback loop going.
Exactly. Like after a major MELA planning session, maybe you casually ask some parents afterwards what they enjoyed most about the discussion or what still concerns them. Or perhaps you have a short informal feedback session with the student volunteers after their first big task. This helps, in near real time, what's working well with your engagement efforts and what's not resonating, allowing you to adjust your approach immediately rather than waiting for a problem to blow up.
Okay. Then there are the crucial interpersonal and team skills. These often sound like the softer skills, but they seem incredibly powerful when you're dealing with all these different personalities and groups involved in the MELA.
They are indeed incredibly powerful. These are the fundamental human skills that really make the difference in managing our relationships effectively. Conflict management. What happens if two different student groups both want their performance slots at the absolute prime time on the MELA stage? How do you navigate that conflict fairly, make sure everyone feels heard and respected, and still ensure the overall MELA schedule runs smoothly? That requires conflict management skills.
Yeah, refereeing sometimes.
Cultural awareness. Understanding and respecting different family customs, regional preferences for food types at the stalls, or maybe traditional ways of celebrating Diwali during the MELA itself is absolutely crucial. It helps you avoid misunderstandings, plan more inclusive activities, and communicate effectively in a way that makes everyone feel valued and respected. Negotiation. Convincing the principal to let you extend the MELA by just 1 extra hour to accommodate a special guest performance, or maybe getting a key vendor to lower their rates slightly because it's for a school charity event. That requires strong negotiation skills, finding common ground, exploring options, aiming for win-win solutions.
Finding the middle ground.
Observation conversation. This is huge. Sometimes simply watching how people interact during meetings or at the event site, or just having informal, casual chats with students, teachers, parents, and vendors helps you stay in touch with their mood, their level of involvement, and maybe sense unspoken concerns or rising excitement. It's like having your ear constantly to the ground. Political awareness. Knowing who the real influencers are within your school hierarchy or the local community, maybe it's a particularly popular student, a highly respected elder in the neighborhood, or an active member of the RWA, Resident Welfare Association. Understanding their perspectives, their connections, and the general power dynamics is key to navigating tricky situations effectively, building coalitions of support, and garnering widespread enthusiasm for your MELA.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of active, mindful engagement is needed. What about setting ground rules? Do they help maintain order and respect when you have so many different groups interacting, maybe with different expectations?
Yes, setting clear ground rules up front can be extremely helpful, especially for a complex event like the Diwali MELA involving diverse groups. These rules essentially define the expected code of conduct for your project team members and for other stakeholders, particularly regarding how they will engage with each other and with the project itself. For example, you might establish ground rules for your MELA planning meetings like, we agree to listen respectfully to all viewpoints, avoid interrupting others, come prepared to discuss the agenda items, and focus on finding solutions, not just highlighting problems. This helps set a positive, collaborative tone right from the start and can minimize potential conflicts or misunderstandings before they even arise.
Good idea. Setting expectations for behavior. And finally, meetings again. What specific types of meetings are most beneficial for actively managing engagement during the heat of the Diwali MELA project?
Right. Meetings remain a core tool used continuously throughout this phase to discuss progress, make decisions, and address any issues or concerns regarding stakeholder engagement. Different types serve different purposes. Decision-making meetings. Maybe to finalize the choice between 2 potential caterers or to lock down the final performance schedule after getting stakeholder input. Issue resolution meetings. If a specific conflict or problem arises, like a misunderstanding with the fire department about the safety plan for the fireworks, you'd hold a meeting focused specifically on resolving that issue with the relevant stakeholders. Lessons learned sessions or retrospectives, often held after completing a major phase of the MELA project, like after all the stall vendors are confirmed and contracts signed, to discuss what went well, what didn't, and what could be improved for the next phase or next year's event. The initial project kickoff meetings. These are crucial for setting the tone, clarifying roles, and getting everyone excited and aligned from the very beginning. And ongoing status update meetings to keep everyone informed about progress, upcoming activities, and any potential challenges.
Different meetings for different needs.
Exactly. For the Mela, this might involve quick, informal, weekly chai pe charcha, discussions over tea, for rapid updates with your core student organizing team. But it might also involve more formal, structured monthly meetings with key external stakeholders like community leaders or major sponsors to formally report on progress, address any significant concerns, and maintain their buy-in.
Okay, so after all this intense ongoing hard work of managing relationships, keeping communication flowing, solving problems, and generally keeping the Diwali Mela moving forward, what are the outputs? What tangible results come from your efforts in this soft main challenge phase?
Good question. What comes out of managing engagement? A primary output, just like in the identification phase, can again be change requests. As you actively manage engagement, listen to feedback, and address issues, new ideas or problems might emerge that require formal changes to the Mela's scope, schedule, or budget. For example, maybe during a meeting, a major sponsor strongly suggests adding a completely new, large performance stage to showcase more local talent. That's a great idea, potentially, but it would definitely impact the budget, space layout, maybe safety planning, so it would require a formal change request to be properly evaluated and approved before you could proceed.
Right, significant changes need formal approval. And then naturally we see project management plan updates and project documents updates again.
Exactly. This is the continuous improvement loop in action. Based on how engagement is actually going and the feedback you receive, your communications management plan and your stakeholder engagement plan will likely need to be updated. You need to refine your strategies based on what you learn is working or not working in practice. For example, if you find that parents are consistently responding much faster to WhatsApp group messages than emails for urgent updates about the Mela, you'd adjust your communication plan accordingly for that group.
Adapting the plan based on reality.
Precisely. And similarly, your various project logs, the change log, tracking approved changes, the issue log, showing resolved or newly identified issues, the lessons learned register, capturing what you learned this week about engaging volunteers, and the stakeholder register, maybe updating someone's contact info or reassessing their influence level, will also be continuously updated with the latest information. This ensures your plans and records stay alive, relevant, and accurately reflect the real-world situation. It also ensures that everything you've learned from actively managing the Diwali Mela relationships is captured, which is invaluable not just for the rest of this project, but for making the next Mela or any future project even better.
Okay, this completes the cycle of planning and doing, which now leads us logically into our final segment, segment 5. This is step 4. Nasar Rakna, keeping a watchful eye and adjusting your course. Expert, this sounds like the monitoring phase, right? Making sure everything we planned and did is actually working and tweaking things if needed.
Precisely. That's exactly what it is. This process is all about continuously monitoring your overall project stakeholder relationships. And then, based on what you observe, tailoring your engagement strategies further. How are they actually engaging compared to your plan? The key benefit here is maintaining or even increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of your stakeholder engagement activities as the Diwali Mela project evolves and as its surrounding environment inevitably changes.
Keeping it effective over time.
Exactly. Think of it like this. You've baked the cake and decorated it beautifully for the Mela stall. Now you're watching carefully. Are people actually buying it? Are they enjoying it? Do you need to change the recipe slightly for the next batch of jalebis? Or maybe adjust how you present the Mela attractions to draw more interest? This monitoring process isn't just something you do at the very end, it's performed continuously throughout the Mela's life, feeding back into the other processes.
Okay, makes sense. So what information do you need to do this monitoring effectively? What are your essential inputs for keeping this watchful eye on the Diwali Mela stakeholders and their engagement?
Right. For effective monitoring, you'll still rely heavily on all your existing project management plans, especially the resource plan. Are the right people still available for engagement tasks? The communications plan, are we following the planned communication schedule? And the stakeholder engagement plan, what are the desired engagement levels we're aiming for?
Right.
These tell you what should be happening, providing your baseline.
Comparing plan versus reality.
Exactly. All your key project documents are also critical inputs again, including the issue log, what stakeholder-related problems are currently active or recurring, The lessons learned register. What did we learn last time about monitoring engagement? The project communications that have actually been sent out. Did people receive them? Did they understand them? The risk register. Are stakeholder-related risks increasing or decreasing? And of course, the stakeholder register. Who are we tracking and what's their current assessed status? But a truly crucial, distinct input for this monitoring process is work performance data.
Okay, work performance data. What exactly does that mean in the context of engaging people for our Diwali Mela? That sounds like getting real-time feedback or metrics.
It's vital, yes. This data gives you the raw facts about how the project work is progressing, which often reflects stakeholder engagement. It tells you who is actually supporting the project actively and how much they are engaging in practical terms. For example, the data might show Suresh actually volunteered for 10 hours at the food stalls last week, or the principal attended 3 out of the 4 key Mela planning meetings this month, or recent parent feedback survey shows a 90% satisfaction rate with safety communications for the Mela. This raw, objective data gives you a real-time picture of actual engagement levels, helping you assess if your engagement strategies are truly working as intended or if there's a gap.
Concrete data, not just feelings.
Right. And you also continue to consider enterprise environmental factors, like maybe there's a sudden local election campaign starting that distracts potential community volunteers, impacting their availability. And organizational process assets like historical data on typical Mela attendance patterns or volunteer drop-off rates, as they can provide context for interpreting the current engagement data and influence how you monitor going forward.
Okay, so you have all this information pouring in, plans, documents, real data. How do you actually check and adapt? What are the tools and techniques you use for this monitoring phase for the Diwali Mela?
Good question. Tools for monitoring and adapting. For data analysis, you might use alternatives analysis. This means evaluating different options if you find that your current engagement strategy isn't working as planned for a particular stakeholder group. For example, if you observe that far fewer students are volunteering for the post-Mela cleanup crew than you need, you'd analyze alternatives. Should we offer extra credit as an incentive? Run a competition between classes. Maybe recruit through class captains instead of just relying on posters. You evaluate the options.
Finding plan B or C.
Exactly. Root cause analysis is used again here to find the underlying reasons why engagement might be problematic. Is the low volunteer turnout for cleanup genuinely because of upcoming exams? Or is the sign-up process itself too complicated and discouraging people? Understanding the root cause helps you address the actual issue effectively, rather than just treating symptoms. And you'll use stakeholder analysis continually, not just at the start. You need to keep determining the current position of key stakeholder groups and individuals at any particular time during the project. Has their influence shifted? Has their interest level changed based on recent events? This ongoing analysis informs your monitoring.
Okay, and for decision-making during monitoring, how do you choose the best way forward if things aren't on track?
Here you might use techniques like multi-criteria decision analysis. This helps you prioritize different criteria for successful engagement and identify the most appropriate choices, especially when you might have conflicting goals or multiple options. For example, if you're trying to decide on the best solution for addressing complaints about overcrowded Mela entrance gates, you might systematically weigh different factors like impact on visitor safety, cost of implementation, speed of implementation, and impact on overall visitor satisfaction to make a more objective, data-driven choice between different potential solutions, like adding more gates, using timed entry, etc.
Weighing the pros and cons systematically.
Exactly. Or sometimes, for simpler decisions, you might just use voting among the core team to select the best response for a variance you've observed in stakeholder engagement. For instance, if volunteer numbers are still low despite initial efforts, should you prioritize getting maximum participation by simplifying the volunteer tasks further? Or should you prioritize perfect execution of activities by perhaps hiring some external paid help for critical roles? Your team might discuss the options and then vote on the preferred approach.
Okay. And you mentioned the stakeholder engagement assessment matrix again, using it for data representation during monitoring. How does that C versus D comparison help here?
This is where that matrix truly shines as a monitoring tool. You revisit it periodically throughout the project. You compare the current engagement level you're observing for each key stakeholder with the desired level you identified in your plan. If your previously resistant neighbor, who was worried about noise from the Mela, is now assessed as neutral or maybe even supportive because of your consistent communication and reassurances about noise control measures, that tells you your specific engagement efforts for them are working. You're closing the gap.
progress.
Exactly. But conversely, if your previously supportive friend suddenly seems unaware or disengaged because maybe they haven't received any updates about the Mela schedule changes recently, the matrix highlights that gap immediately. It tells you that you need to re-engage them quickly to bring them back to the desired supportive level. It's a really powerful visual way to track progress over time, identify exactly where you need to refocus your engagement energy, and also, importantly, to celebrate the small victories when you successfully shift someone's engagement level in the right direction.
That's great, visual tracking. Now, for communication skills during monitoring, you mentioned feedback and presentations again. How are they used differently here?
Yes, they're still crucial, but perhaps with a focus on closing the loop. Now you're using feedback mechanisms not just to gather information, but also to ensure that the information you're putting out, like status updates or responses to concerns, is actually being received and understood correctly by all your Mela stakeholders. Are your messages landing? You're also using presentations or reports to give clear updates on progress, including how stakeholder engagement itself is tracking. For instance, giving a formal presentation to the school management committee on the Mela's overall progress, which might include metrics on volunteer numbers, sponsor satisfaction feedback, and positive parent comments gathered through surveys. Or actively seeking specific feedback from volunteers after the event about what they liked or didn't like during their shifts to inform future monitoring and planning. It's a continuous loop of sharing information and listening to the response.
Okay. And those vital interpersonal and team skills, that they must make a comeback here too, perhaps even more importantly when you're actively monitoring and trying to adjust things, maybe during the busy Mela itself.
Oh, absolutely. They are essential for continuous understanding, inspiring people, and connecting with Mela stakeholders, especially when things might be getting hectic or stressful during the event execution or final phases. Active listening. Really listening, not just hearing words, but trying to understand the emotions and underlying concerns behind what people are saying. This helps reduce misunderstandings and respond more effectively. If a vendor is complaining loudly, are they truly upset just about their stall location, or is there an underlying personal issue or stress factor contributing? Active listening helps uncover that.
Reading between the lines.
Cultural awareness. Continuously planning your communications and interactions during the busy Mela based on the cultural differences and requirements of various attendees, performers, and team members. This ensures ongoing respect and inclusion. For instance, being mindful of specific religious observances related to the Raleigh when scheduling key activities or announcements during the event itself. Leadership. Inspiring people to continue supporting the Mela vision and helping them overcome challenges, especially if unexpected problems arise during the event, like sudden rain or a technical glitch on stage. Good leadership keeps morale high and people focused. Networking. Not formal networking, but informally talking to people, mingling with visitors, volunteers, and vendors during the Mela to get real-time information about stakeholder moods and feelings, sensing the pulse of the Mela community. Often the best, most honest insights come from these casual conversations around the event. Political awareness. Still understanding the power dynamics within the school or community to communicate effectively with key influencers, ensuring their continued support throughout the event, or managing any last-minute concerns they might raise.
Got it. Constant sensing and adapting using those skills. And finally, meetings are always part of this, I imagine. Maybe even quick daily check-ins during the most intense phases.
Indeed. Various types of meetings remain crucial for monitoring and adapting. Things like quick daily stand-up meetings with your core Mela team during the final week or on the event days themselves. Just 15 minutes to quickly assess immediate issues, check on stakeholder reactions, and delegate urgent tasks. Or perhaps longer retrospective meetings held after a major phase, like after the event is over but before the final report, to assess what went well and what didn't regarding stakeholder engagement throughout the process. And these don't always have to be face-to-face, especially for quick updates. Teleconferencing, video calls, shared online documents, technology can bridge the gap. But direct interaction often remains ideal for sensing nuances. The main goal is constant calibration based on real feedback and observation.
Okay, so after all this continuous monitoring, analyzing, and adjusting, what are the tangible results of keeping this watchful eye on our Diwali Mela and its stakeholders?
Good question. What comes out of monitoring? The first key output is work performance information. This isn't the raw data anymore, it's processed information. It gives you a detailed status update specifically on stakeholder engagement. How supportive are they actually compared to the desired levels you set out in your plan? It contextualizes the raw data. So a report might consolidate the data and say something like, Overall, volunteer engagement met 80% of our target hours, with particularly strong participation from Class 9. Parent feedback surveys indicate positive sentiment regarding event safety communications, exceeding our target satisfaction score. It provides concrete insights into performance.
Okay, performance info.
Yeah.
And if things aren't going as planned according to that information, you might generate change requests again.
Precisely. If your monitoring reveals that stakeholder engagement isn't working as intended in a critical area, or if new issues arise during monitoring that significantly impact your overall MILA plan, you might need to submit a formal change request for specific corrective or preventive actions to improve the current level or approach to stakeholder engagement. For example, maybe monitoring reveals that volunteer numbers for the final cleanup shift are critically low. You might submit a change request to authorize offering a small incentive, like pizza, to encourage sign-ups or corrective action. Or maybe monitoring identifies potential crowd control issues developing near the main stage during peak hours, leading to a change request to add more security patrols proactively, a preventive action.
Right, taking action based on the monitoring. And just like in the previous steps, this feeds back into project management plan updates and project documents updates.
Yes, absolutely. This really closes the loop. Your resource plan, communications plan, and stakeholder engagement plan will likely need adjustments based on what you learn from monitoring. If you find that student volunteers are consistently not responding well to formal email announcements about the MELA, you might update your communication plan to prioritize using the school's social media channels or making in-person announcements in classes instead.
Learning and adapting the plans.
Exactly. And all your key projects documents the issue log, closing out resolved issues, adding new ones found during monitoring, the lessons learned register, capturing insights like daily stand-ups were crucial during event week, the risk register, updating risks based on monitoring results, and the stakeholder register, maybe formally changing a stakeholder's classification based on their observed engagement, will all be updated with the latest information derived from your monitoring activities. This ensures that your project documentation always reflects the real-time status of your stakeholder relationships and captures the learnings. And it truly completes the management cycle. You identify, you plan engagement, you manage the engagement, and then you monitor it, using what you learn from monitoring to potentially re-identify, replan, and remanage. It's a constant dynamic dance, but it's absolutely necessary for keeping the project aligned and stakeholders effectively engaged throughout its entire life. Hashtag tag outro out.
Wow, expert. This has been an absolutely incredible deep dive. Seriously fascinating stuff. So just to wrap it up, what does this all really mean for us, for our listeners? Whether you're, building a grand temple or organizing a huge Diwali Mela for your school, like we discussed, or maybe even just trying to get your friends to agree on which movie to watch for movie night. Managing the people involved, your stakeholders, it seems like it's just absolutely crucial. It's not just a business buzzword. It feels more like a fundamental life skill.
That's truly the core message, I think. It's not just about what you're trying to achieve, but so much depends on who you involve and how you involve them along the way. Understanding project stakeholder management at its heart is really about understanding human connections, communication dynamics, and the power of influence. It's about trying to ensure that everyone who can make a real difference to your project is, ideally, rowing in the same direction as you, or at the very least, not actively rowing against you. It's about turning potential obstacles into powerful allies, or at least neutral parties.
Yeah, and being well informed about this, knowing these steps and concepts, it really isn't just for people running big business projects and fancy offices. It genuinely feels like a fundamental life skill that applies to almost everything you do. It helps you anticipate problems before they completely derail your plans. It helps you build stronger, more effective relationships with practically everyone around you. And ultimately, it helps you become a more effective leader, whether that's in your school project team, within your family discussions, or out in your local communities, like developing your people superpower, maybe.
I like that people superpower. So here's maybe an important question for all of you listening to ponder as you go about your day-to-day or this week. Think about a project, and remember, project can be anything with the goal that you're working on right now. Maybe it is preparing for your upcoming exams, or perhaps planning a surprise birthday party for a sibling, or maybe even just trying to convince your parents to let you go on that weekend field trip with your friends. Who are your stakeholders in that specific project? Who is impacted? Who has influence? And how can you maybe use some of what we've discussed today, thinking about identifying their interests, planning how you'll communicate with them, actively managing their expectations and concerns, and keeping a watchful eye on their involvement? How can you use these ideas to make your own project, whatever it is, a roaring success?
Yeah, go on, give it a try. Think about it for something small in your own life. You might be genuinely surprised at the difference it makes when you start approaching your interactions, your plans, with this kind of stakeholder awareness. It really is all about understanding people better, and that's a skill that will serve you well, always, in everything you do. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building those powerful connections.